So picture this. A resignation letter lands on the CEO's desk, right?
Right.
And the immediate reaction from the higher-ups is usually something like, great, we finally have a chance to bring in some fresh blood.
Yeah, exactly. The old, let's find someone stronger to turn this place around routine.
Exactly. But, what if I told you that focusing on that next hire is actually the exact reason your company is, well, bleeding money?
And burning out talent.
Right, and just fundamentally failing to achieve its goals. So for today's deep dive, we are going to completely upend how you look at leadership turnover.
It really is a critical perspective shift. I mean, we're looking at this fascinating paper by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It's titled Beyond the Stronger Leader Fallacy, Healing Organizational Distress.
Such a good title.
It really is. And our objective today is to explore the underlying mechanics of organizational failure. We want to show you why that resignation letter we just talked about, why it's rarely just a chance for a new recruitment campaign.
Yeah, it's usually a warning sign, isn't it?
Right. Most of the time, it is a blaring alarm bell signaling deep systemic dysfunction.
Okay, so before we can analyze who is actually leaving, we first have to understand why we consistently and wrongly, I might add, blame them when they walk out the door.
We do it all the time.
We really do. And Westover brings up this concept, I think it's from Mindel and his colleagues, called the romance of leadership.
Yes, the romance of leadership.
And it's this ingrained cognitive bias that we all just seem to share. We have this overwhelming tendency to attribute all of a company's success or, all of its catastrophic failure strictly to a single leader's personal traits.
While completely ignoring the structural reality of the environment they're actually operating in.
Exactly.
The romance of leadership is incredibly powerful, because it gives us a simple narrative. We absolutely love the myth of the heroic individual.
Oh, for sure. So like the lone genius CEO.
Right. If a school struggles or a clinic fails, we just say, well, the leader lacked vision. If it succeeds, we call the leader a visionary genius. But Westover's research introduces a necessary counter-concept here, which is structural unsustainability.
Structural unsustainability.
Yeah, this occurs when the actual day-to-day demands of a job chronically and consistently exceed the resources provided to do that job. The result is this perpetual state of what they call role overload.
Role overload. So you're saying it literally does not matter how competent or how brilliant or how hardworking you are.
Precisely. The architectural structure of the position itself makes success mathematically and practically impossible. I mean, you just cannot outwork a structurally broken system.
It makes me think of hiring a world-class Michelin star chef.
Okay, I like this.
Yeah, so you bring them into a restaurant, but the kitchen has a broken stove, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the electricity cuts out every hour. And they literally have no fresh ingredients. Right. And then when the food comes out terrible and the chef inevitably quits in frustration, the restaurant management doesn't fix the stove. They just immediately launch this, expensive global search for a better chef.
That is a perfect analogy. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you really have to distinguish between normal organizational metabolism and organizational pathology.
Okay, metabolism versus pathology.
Right. So people retire, they relocate for family, maybe they get promoted. That is normal metabolism. A planned, orderly succession is healthy.
Sure.
But when you start seeing premature departures, and specifically we're talking about leaders leaving within the first 2 years of their appointment, that is pathology. That is a massive diagnostic event. It indicates that the role itself might be structurally unsustainable.
Wow. And if the system is completely broken, you really have to ask who is bearing the heaviest load of that brokenness.
Absolutely.
So the paper transitions from general leadership mechanics to a very specific, really acute example, which is the impact on Black women leaders, particularly within K-12 education.
Yes.
And just as a quick note for you listening, because this touches on some politically charged sociological frameworks, things like intersectionality, it is important to mention that we are strictly breaking down Dr. Westover's analysis here.
Right, we're looking at the research.
Exactly. Our goal is simply to convey the arguments and the frameworks presented in his research so we can understand the issue. We're not here to endorse any specific political viewpoint.
Just following the data.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this because my initial reaction to this specific part of the research was actual confusion.
How so?
Well, when we talk about leadership, isn't resilience and strength usually considered like a universally good thing?
Right.
How does being perceived as a strong, resilient person, a quote-unquote superwoman, how does that actually become an organizational trap?
It's a vital question. The research draws on Woods-Kiscumbia's concept of the Superwoman Schema.
The Superwoman Schema.
Right. This is a specific constellation of cultural expectations placed upon Black women that emphasizes, well, an obligation to present unwavering strength. They're expected to constantly suppress their own emotions, to resist vulnerability, and, most dangerously in this context, to succeed despite severely limited resources.
Wow. So the organization essentially weaponizes their resilience against them.
Exactly. And this is where the framework of intersectionality, which was originally coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, this is where it comes into play. It describes how multiple systems of subordination, like race and gender, intersect to create entirely unique, compounded experiences.
Right, because it's not just one or the other.
No, it's both acting at the same time. And when you combine that intersectionality with these structurally unsustainable roles we talked about, organizations essentially begin treating these leaders as inexhaustible sources of nurture and problem solving.
Just a bottomless well.
Exactly. Sociologist Patricia Hill Collins termed this dynamic mammification. The institution literally extracts the leader's labor and emotional endurance to compensate for its own institutional lack of resources, as well as its historical racism and sexism.
Man. Oh, and the mechanics of this are so insidious, because the leaders are forced to just absorb it silently.
Yes.
The text actually talks about strength concealment. Because of these overwhelming schemas, these leaders are often required to hide their legitimate needs.
Right, they can't ask for help.
Exactly. They have to actively conceal their struggles just to maintain their position and feel like they actually belong in the culture. I mean, they are put in an impossible bind. If they express that they are drowning in work, they face immediate professional penalties.
Or they're deemed not strong enough for the job.
Right. So they just conceal the strain until they completely collapse.
And, that collapse isn't just someone needing a weekend off to sleep. We are talking about profound emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and severe physical health deterioration. It is the literal organizational extraction of a human being's well-being to paper over the cracks of a broken system.
Which is just devastating on a human level.
Yeah.
But, this psychological toll doesn't just stay with the individual.
Not at all.
When those burned out leaders inevitably walk out the door, that human cost immediately transforms into a massive financial and structural penalty for the organization.
A huge penalty.
So even if an organization operates purely on a cold, calculating bottom line, what is the institutional fallout of ignoring this revolving door?
Well, the financial cost alone, it should stop any board of directors in their tracks.
Really?
Oh, yeah. When you factor in transition expenses, so that's the recruiting firm fees, the onboarding processes, and the massive drop in productivity during the learning curve,
Right.
Replacing a leader costs between 100% and 150% of the position's annual salary.
Okay, well, let's put a real terrifying number on that for a second.
Let's do it.
If a principal or, say, a clinic director makes $100,000 a year, the organization is burning between $100,000 and $150,000 just to replace them.
Every single time they leave.
That is insane. It's like paying the minimum balance on a high-interest credit card. You are spending $150,000 every 2 years just to tread water, basically paying the interest of recruitment fees, while the principal debt of your broken organizational culture never actually gets paid down.
That is exactly how the math works out. You are paying astronomical fees for the illusion of action, and the downstream effects are even more destructive.
How so?
Well, the source highlights this major study of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, conducted by Batey and colleagues. They found that principal turnover directly triggers a drop in teacher retention. The high-performing teachers leave when the leader leaves.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. But furthermore, student math achievement drops by 0.02 standard deviations.
Okay, hold on. To a lot of people, a 0.02 standard deviation drop sounds like, statistical noise. What does that actually mean in the real world?
To put that in human terms, that is the equivalent of wiping out weeks or even months of academic learning for an entire classroom of kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, all of that progress is erased simply because the principal left the building. And those negative effects, they linger like a dark cloud for roughly 2 years after the transition happens.
Because the new leader comes in, has no idea what the history is, and restarts all the initiatives from scratch.
Exactly. The paper calls it institutional memory loss.
It creates this endless cycle of constant planning with absolutely no execution. And I imagine for you, as a parent or a community member watching this happen, your trust just completely erodes. You just stop believing the institution can actually fulfill its basic promises.
Which is exactly why diagnosing the disease before prescribing the cure is so critical. Now that we understand the pathology of this turnover, what do evidence-based solutions actually look like?
Right.
The research points out that we have to look at what happens before a new hire is even considered.
Right, because the knee-jerk instinct is to just immediately post the job ad on LinkedIn and pretend everything is fine.
What's fascinating here is the concept of a pre-recruitment assessment. Instead of rushing to fill the empty seat, the organization intentionally hits pause.
They just stop.
Yes. They conduct comprehensive 360-degree environmental scans. They use independent third-party organizations to conduct deep exit interviews with the departing leader.
Oh, the independent part is probably crucial.
The independence is key there because it removes the fear of retaliation. It allows the outgoing leader to actually tell the truth about what broke them, and then they rigorously audit whether the resources on the ground actually align with the responsibilities in the job description.
Which they probably don't.
Yeah.
And the paper highlights the Cleveland Metropolitan School District as a phenomenal case study for this exact process.
They really are.
Yeah, they were dealing with massive, continuous principal turnover. But instead of just churning through more resumes, they brought in those third-party assessors. And when they actually looked under the hood, they found severe understaffing and massive deferred maintenance in those specific schools.
Right.
The buildings were literally falling apart, and there weren't enough adults in the building to manage the kids.
And the crucial part is the mechanism of what Cleveland did next. They didn't just hire someone and tell them to fix the building. They fixed those issues before bringing in new principals.
They fixed the stove?
Yes. They poured money into deferred maintenance. They adjusted the accountability timelines. They fundamentally invested the resources first. And as a direct result, retention in those previously troubled schools significantly improved. Like you said, they finally fixed the stove before hiring the chef.
But let's be real. Not every organization has the budget to magically fix their infrastructure overnight.
That's true.
If you can't fix the stove immediately, you at least have to be honest that it's broken. The text discusses realistic job previews and radical transparency during the hiring process.
Yes, the Kaiser Permanente Southern California nursing leadership example is a brilliant illustration of this mechanism in action.
Okay, what do they do?
Well, they were facing cripplingly high turnover in their nurse manager roles, so they completely changed their recruitment strategy. They started telling candidates the ugly, unvarnished truth up front.
Wait, I have to push back on this.
Okay, go ahead.
If you are sitting across from a top-tier, highly recruited candidate, and you tell them your hospital is understaffed, chaotic, and struggling with deep cultural issues, I mean, aren't you just going to terrify the best talent? How did Kaiser avoid triggering an immediate hiring freeze? Who says yes to that?
It seems completely counterintuitive, but the data tells a different story. They didn't just casually mention it. They actually introduced finalists to the departing leaders to get the unfiltered reality of the daily grind.
Wow.
Yeah, they laid out the severe staffing constraints. They basically said, here's the exact mess you are walking into. And yes, while it absolutely took them longer to find someone willing to take the job,
I bet.
the retention rates for the people who did accept skyrocketed.
I guess there was zero disillusionment.
Exactly. When a leader walks in on day one knowing exactly where the landmines are, they can proactively prepare their coping strategies. They can build their support systems before they are in crisis. The psychological contract between the employer and the employee is based on grounded reality rather than a romanticized fantasy that shatters in the first week.
Okay, so let's say you follow the playbook. You diagnose the problem, you fix what you have, the budget to fix, and you hire the right person with total radical honesty.
Right.
Once they're actually sitting in the office,
Yeah.
how do you keep the role overload from crushing them anyway? Because the job is still massive.
This requires redesigning the role itself and providing heavily structured support. Chicago Public Schools offers a fantastic blueprint for the mechanics of onboarding.
What do they figure out?
They realized their first-year principals were incredibly isolated and overwhelmed. So they created a highly structured program giving them a 90 to 180-day ramp-up period.
Meaning they weren't expected to just magically fix a failing school on their very first day. They actually had protected time to observe and learn.
Yes. They explicitly reduced accountability expectations early on. They also didn't leave them alone. They provided peer cohorts and assigned them formal veteran mentors who had navigated the same challenges.
That's huge.
It was. By providing that structured buffer, retention improved by approximately 15 percentage points.
That is a massive retention bump.
Yeah.
Just from giving people time to breathe. But, even with the best onboarding in the world, some jobs are quite literally too big for one human being to physically execute.
Definitely.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The paper introduces the concept of distributed leadership, specifically looking at the Mount Sinai health system.
Yes, great example.
They had these nurse managers who were trying to handle clinical oversight, operational duties, administrative payroll, and staff development all at the exact same time.
Which is the textbook definition of structural unsustainability and role overload. You cannot simultaneously mentor a new nurse while calculating departmental budgets and handling a patient emergency.
Exactly. So Mount Sinai didn't just send out an email telling these managers to work harder or, offer a seminar on time management.
Right.
They fundamentally redesigned the structure of the department. They created specialized clinical nurse roles specifically designed to offload the training and the quality improvement tasks. They actively pulled heavy responsibilities off the manager's plate and handed them to someone else.
Yep.
And by physically separating those duties, it immediately reduced role strain. The counterintuitive takeaway here is that the most effective way to get strong leadership out of someone is to stop expecting them to do all the leading.
You distribute the accountability across a team. It is a fundamental mechanical shift away from relying on individual heroism toward building systemic capacity. But, and this is crucial, structural changes like distributing leadership require a deep foundation of real infrastructure and cultural accountability to work.
Right, which brings us to the final and perhaps most important piece of the puzzle.
Which is?
Creating an environment that actively protects and develops its leaders, rather than treating them like shock absorbers for organizational failure.
Yes. Let's look at the mechanics of infrastructure first. Denver public schools realized that you cannot take a leader, drop them into a low-performing school, and just wish them luck.
Right.
Before they placed principals in these challenging environments, they systematically lowered class sizes. They added dedicated, full-time instructional coaches to the staff. They invested millions in the foundation so that when the leader arrived, they could actually focus on strategic improvement.
Rather than spending 10 hours a day managing daily crises and putting out operational fires, they actually invested in this system, rather than just waiting for a savior to magically fix it.
Exactly.
But infrastructure isn't just about budget lines or class sizes and staff counts. It is also deeply about culture, which is where the Oakland Unified School District case study comes in.
Yes.
This example is intense, but it is so incredibly crucial to understand. They had Black and Latina principals who were facing overt, aggressive racial hostility from parents and community members.
And historically, the mechanism organizations use in these scenarios is silence.
Yeah.
They have historically left marginalized leaders to manage that hostility completely on their own, essentially treating the navigation of racism as if it were just an unspoken part of the job description.
Right, but Oakland didn't do that. They recognized that as a systemic failure and instituted aggressive cultural accountability.
It really stepped up.
They did. They implemented explicit anti-racism policies. They forced parent advisory councils to undergo training on professional conduct. But most importantly, and I think this is the key mechanism, district-level leaders actually showed up at contentious community meetings.
Yeah.
When parents crossed the line, the superintendent or district officials would directly interfere, step in front of the principal, and shut down the inappropriate conduct in real time.
Yeah.
They instituted actual zero-tolerance policies with visible enforcement.
This raises an important question, though. What good are your corporate diversity and retention efforts if the organization refuses to actively protect the people it recruits?
Wow, yeah.
The Oakland example proves that diversity efforts completely fail without substantive systemic accountability. You cannot recruit marginalized leaders into highly toxic, hostile environments and expect them to survive purely on their own resilience. The institution itself must act as a physical and policy shield.
The institution has to take the hit, not the individual. And part of protecting individuals is fundamentally changing how we source them in the first place. The final example from Dr. Westover's research is Providence Public Schools. Instead of going into a frantic, expensive external search every single time a principal left, they built long-term internal pipelines.
The mechanics of this are brilliant, honestly. They proactively funded aspiring teachers to get their leadership preparation credentials. They created cohort-based learning communities that spanned years.
They essentially grew their own leaders from the ground up.
Yes, they did.
And over a 5-year period, this strategy produced a steady, reliable supply of highly diverse principals who actually stayed in their jobs longer and were significantly more effective.
Because they already knew the system.
Exactly. They already had relationships in the building. They weren't outsiders burning themselves out trying to learn the culture while simultaneously trying to fix it.
When you look at all of these mechanisms together, from independent exit interviews to distributed leadership to physical district level protection, it paints a very clear picture of what actual organizational health looks like.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening right now?
Good question.
I think the core takeaway from Dr. Westover's research is that we desperately need to recalibrate the psychological contract between employers and leaders. We have to normalize boundary setting. We have to actively model rest and recovery.
Absolutely.
And above all else, we have to stop demanding heroic, exhausting, superhuman self-sacrifice just to cover up the gaping cracks in a broken organizational infrastructure.
And fundamentally, we must start viewing leadership vacancies not as immediate routine recruitment tasks, but as urgent diagnostic warnings.
Exactly. When someone walks out the door, don't just ask who is next. You need to stop, look at the environment, and ask what broke.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over based on the research we've discussed today. I want you to look closely at your own workplace tomorrow morning. Think about the infrastructure, the hidden culture, and the silent, heavy expectations placed on the people in charge. If your organization could suddenly no longer rely on the heroic, exhausting sacrifices of a few key individuals to absorb its systemic failures, would your organization even survive the week? Or are you just one resignation letter away from discovering that you've been desperately searching for a better chef while the kitchen has been on fire the entire time?